Welcome to this presentation. I am really happy to be here. Thank you for coming to my talk. My first profession was magician. I was a member of the International Order of Magicians, and I went to my first conference in Portland, Oregon. I was 11 years old. My parents let me go alone. The hotel was full of professional magicians, vendors and manufacturers of magic shows and entertainment. I bought my first fire illusion there, and I have loved going to conferences ever since. This search and AI stuff we work on is amazing, even when you know how the trick works. This is our agenda, and I want to point out that the orange parts, spell correction, entity recognition, and search, are the 3 stages behind the Chatbot. That's the quick version of how it works. Here are example questions and responses. We ask, what is colon cancer? The bot answers, colon cancer, actually I can't quite read it, happens when cells that are not normal grow in your colon. If we ask the bot, what are the symptoms of colon cancer? Colon cancer in its early stages usually doesn't cause any symptoms. And what's the treatment for colon cancer? Surgery is almost always used to treat colon cancer. When you turn 50, your doctor refers you for a colonoscopy. After your colonoscopy, when you wake up from the anesthesia, you're feeling pretty good. And they tell you not to make any important decisions or do anything that requires good judgment for the rest of the day. These two emailed this picture to all of Healthwise, my company, as a public service announcement when they discovered they were both getting their first colonoscopy on the same day. Bring it back to the bot. Does a colonoscopy hurt? The bot answers, the colon prep will cause diarrhea and possibly cramping. Now compare that with our search results page for the same API endpoint with the same query. So that is a Healthwise content browser product. And for the search, does a colonoscopy hurt? We get the first answer is, how does having a colonoscopy feel? And if you look at the first sentence out of that in the abstract, it is, the colon prep will cause diarrhea and possibly cramping. In other words, my chatbot UI uses the same search API and returns the same first sentence as the result. These are just 2 UIs on the same back end. And that's the basic trick to it, to this bot. It's been said that search is a conversation, and I agree with that. And in this case, this conversation bot is literally a search. This works because we have indexed each document with the one taxonomic concept and aspect, what we call an aspect, and I'll talk about that more, which together precisely describe semantically what the document is about. This is the state or the condition that you are trying to achieve with all the deep learning, word-to-vec, and Microsoft dual embedding space model efforts that you put in. You want to get to accurate document aboutness. The aboutness on these 4 documents can be seen in the pair of ovals beneath each topic. Try out the laser pointer. So these two things, we have the concept and the aspect, the concept and the aspect, and the concept and the aspect, and those together describe the aboutness of each document in those results. And in case you can't read that, that's colonoscopy, how it feels, colonoscopy, a definition, colonoscopy, and pre-procedure overview. And together, the two entities precisely describe the semantic aboutness of the document. In order to get precise document aboutness, the documents must be precisely about something. Healthwise content itself is written as focused topics. Each is about one precise concern of consumer healthcare. That makes it possible to give these documents precise semantic tagging. So I would add that a key challenge for document aboutness is having documents that are about one thing. And you also need a taxonomy, or at least a vocabulary that contains all the things those documents are about. I'm reminded of the Mark Twain quote, "I'm sorry for writing such a long letter. I would have written a shorter one if I had more time." A little about Healthwise and what this content is really. So Healthwise, you may have never heard of. Healthwise is a 44-year-old nonprofit. I've been there for 14 years, and I've been using Solr for about 8 years. Our mission is to help people make better health decisions. We are essentially now a health publishing company, and these are some of our clients, most of which use our health encyclopedia and other products, and maybe you are insured by one of them. If you use their health knowledge base that many of these companies provide online, then you've probably read our content or seen one of our videos or used one of our health tools. And these are some of our health provider clients. Maybe you use one of these for your health care. If you've received a patient instruction from the hospital or were prescribed a video, which is something that's happening more and more now, or other content prescribed by a clinician, that was probably Healthwise. We have great writers, artists, and designers, as well as doctors and other medical professionals creating our content, which is also then medically reviewed. Everything is medically reviewed by specialists around the country. We use plain language and reading level guidelines to make it consumer friendly. And we have won many industry awards for quality and clarity. But more than awards in scientific medical accuracy, what is really significant is how our content is helping people every day. People tell us about how there was a nurse that was moved to tears by the understanding and helpful way a Healthwise video explained to her patient the challenges they would face with their newly diagnosed condition. When faced with a new and unpleasant reality about your health, you want to learn from a sympathetic voice, and Healthwise does that. We also create content that can help you decide if you really need back surgery, or if there is a good, less invasive option, or whether you need to take your child to the emergency room or can take care of the symptoms at home. Which brings me to spelling. So it should come as no surprise, given these qualities that I've been describing, that we don't have misspellings in our content. But the Solr spell checker dictionary, made from our content and taxonomy, wants to not use the rare words on the assumption that rare words are misspellings. If you've used built a spelling dictionary from content, then you probably know what I'm talking about. It makes sense for user-generated content or other less curated content. In healthcare, there are lots of words. Many of them are difficult to spell. So this bot will correct the misspelling of chlamydia. That, in the question there, it's misspelled. We are using the Solr direct spell checker, but with the spell check extended results, which includes a term frequency property. And we look at that to see if a suspect term occurs even just once in our content, and if so, we call it good. So we have to override the way that the spell checker works to not correct the spelling all the time, because we assume the spelling is correct if it is in the dictionary. In any case, we found that it is important to clarify misspellings up front, or the rest of the flow can't work so well because users misspell or mistype things frequently, in case you didn't know that. After we've checked the user's spelling, it's time to move on to entity recognition on the entered term or phrase. Google's Dialogflow does this. I used that at one point. AWS Comprehend does this. Microsoft Azure's Lewis does this. I used that at one point. And Solr's Text Tagger. These are all good options to do the job. Entity recognition being where, of course, you want to recognize the concepts that you know about, the terms that you know about from user input. The important ingredient here is that you need a taxonomy, or at least a vocabulary, of all the entity synonyms. So the entity recognition algorithm, what I'm saying is that that's not the important part. The important part is getting all the right words. If you don't yet have a taxonomy or a set of vocabularies, you need to build one from your content or obtain one or both. So let me tell you about our Healthwise taxonomy. These are views of the wellness area of our taxonomy. Any taxonomists out there? Okay, taxonomy is war, right? At Healthwise, the taxonomy team manager is a big Marine. And he's the nicest, most humble, hardworking knowledge engineering manager you could ask for. His US Marine Corps training is brought to bear when reconciling the differences between a battling librarian and a taxonomist debating the precise meaning of a word. Now, Healthwise is a respectful work environment, so these debates turn out well, but a great deal of discipline makes them intense. We have concepts for several thousand medical conditions. We have many thousands more concepts for procedures, tests, treatments, wellness, anatomy, prevention, and medications. We have groupings by medical specialties, children's health and pregnancy, and others. These concepts are indexed to our content and can be integrated with healthcare systems via hundreds of thousands of codes. The codes are in terminology systems such as SNOMED. Anyone heard of SNOMED? Okay, lots of people have heard of SNOMED. ICD-10, lots of people heard of ICD-10. LOINC, NUC, RX norm, and NDC. Our taxonomy is built in part from the National Library of Medicine's UMLS. or Unified Medical Language System, which is pretty awesome. It's a free, ginormous, well, it's not all the constituent terminologies are free, but free to access because it's a national content. The UMLS is a much, much bigger taxonomy of taxonomies, joining terminologies at common concepts. If you're looking for a medical taxonomy, the UMLS has all of medicine. We enhance and recombine the concepts we use from the UMLS with consumer synonyms, additional concept relationships, and aspect relationships to content. So each dot in this view is a concept, and next I'll show you the typical data on one of those concepts. This is for virtual colonoscopy with translated keywords, several medical code sets, aspect relationships to documents, relationships to other concepts, and consumer and clinician synonyms. And that's the JSON returned from our taxonomy API. Most use of our content originates from health systems using one or more of these code sets. In other words, of the roughly 45 million times a month that people are using Healthwise content, the content was found by a code. And that's about, we get about 120,000 users, mostly by codes every day, mostly through hospital systems. These code sets are constantly being updated. The CPT code set recently added codes for 3D printing. Any 3D printing fans out there? 3D printing is used now in some dental work and some surgical procedures. And so now there's codes for that in healthcare. For fun, I've listed a few of the most ridiculous ICD-10 codes: sucked into a jet engine, subsequent encounter, struck by a duck, and burned due to water skis on fire. And these ICD-10 codes are silly, but they do illustrate how precisely the code set is made. Healthwise doesn't have content on any of those, and so we don't support those specific codes. Like ICD-10, we do about 44,000 of the 65,000 codes, because, like I said, we just don't have content about everything. Some things don't make the cut. Medical codes are how healthcare conditions, treatments, and everything is represented in an electronic medical record. And interestingly, there have been medical codes going back 150 years. If there isn't a code for it, then practically it doesn't exist in healthcare. The Healthwise taxonomy is designed to index our content to these codes, but also to the way consumers think about healthcare and the terms consumers use. Which brings me to the search, and what the heck are these aspects I've mentioned a few times? Aspects are what we call the verb-like things that relate the concept to the document. It's a relationship as opposed to a concept. In a semantic triples data store, anyone use RDF? RDF triples, or semantic triples, have a subject, a predicate, and an object, and that's your data record. In that case, the aspect is the predicate, the joining relationship. It relates the subject to the object. In our data design, the object is the document. So we have the concept, the aspect, and then the document. And here you can see that where for the concept bone scan, the aspect is how it feels going to a document, which may be a video or an image or words. And then bone scan belongs in the taxonomy under a given hierarchy. So we manage a precise taxonomy of concepts, which contain codes and consumer-friendly synonyms. The aspect is the relationship between the concept bone scan and the document, video, or picture. And here we see there's also aspects of overview, why done, how feels, risks, and the rest, which are all things you can have with a bone scan. Makes sense, right? The aspect is kind of verbish. And I'm kind of thinking of part of speech tagging. If you're doing part of speech tagging, which is not what we're doing, but the aspect winds up being kind of the action part. Whereas the medical concepts tend to be nouns. Not always, but they're more nounish. For entity recognition, we are, for entity recognition, the aspect is just another vocabulary. So entity recognition works the same on the aspects. We resolve a number of terms to say, oh, you're talking about this. That's the entity. But they're completely different in how we use them, which I'll explain. At Healthwise, we have about 100 aspects in our domain of consumer healthcare. Looking at an example, for the question, what does a bone scan feel like? Entity recognition identifies the concept bone scan pretty easily because you said bone scan, not even a synonym. What does a bone scan feel like? And entity recognition also recognizes the aspect, how feels. And see how we got all the bone scan matches. So in terms of the search, bone scan is an important factor, but not all the how feels aspects. So when we're searching, when we take the entity recognition for bone scan and feels, they aren't searched the same way across the content. If we grabbed all the, so how feels is exactly what we want here, but if we grabbed all the how feels stuff, it would be crazy. It would just be how feels about essentially random things. So we don't try to match on the aspect. They aren't the subject. So I used Solr's re-rank feature to prioritize the target aspect within the bone scan matches. To be clear, what I'm telling you is that from the entity recognition, the concepts and aspects are just different kinds of entities to match by synonyms, but when it comes to searching and ranking, the aspects are different. They are bad for initial matching because they will bring in content that is unrelated to bone scan, but they make all the difference in ranking the results to accurately get at the intent of the user. Consider if you got the other results here for what does a bone scan feel like. As search results, these are okay because they are the next most relevant available results about bone scans. But it would be bad if we return the results that just began with what does, if you were doing a straight up text matching search. What does can match on all kinds of stuff that would look like junk. But the aspect, how it feels, captures what the user is thinking about. It's their intent. That's where the magic happens, in my opinion. The aspect is the intent and the thing that really makes this kind of application work. Some closing examples of where I think you'll see how it all works. What is a cold? An upper respiratory tract infection, URI, is a bacterial viral infection of the nose, sinuses, or throat. So maybe you can spot in this how cold obviously is, entity recognition finds that as a synonym for URI, or upper respiratory tract infection, which is sort of the more proper way it's codified. So we match to that. And what is the aspect, which means you're looking for a definition of this thing. So we just went to a definition of upper respiratory tract infection. How do I treat an ingrown toenail? You can try the following steps at home to relieve the pain caused by your ingrown toenail and help the nail to grow out naturally, blah, blah, blah. Ingrown toenail is the concept that's matched, and treat, or treatment, is the aspect. So we go to the first document about ingrown toenail treatment. And what causes a heart attack is should be pretty straightforward at this point to you. I hope you're understanding how that works. We got heart attack and cause. Ta-da! I feel very fortunate to be conferencing with all of you. This has been a live stream of the language center of my brain in its native format, words. Thank you. Yes, they're in the back.
Are you tagging the documents that are going to index the aspects?
Yes.
Are you buying a link to those aspects? I'm just curious if you have certain documents that might be mention cancer and others that are actually about cancer, or the aspects are different, like the treatment's mentioned, but it's not really focused. How are you differentiating what's about an aspect of that aspect?
That's a great question. The question is, are we weighting the aspects and clarifying that aboutness? It is a real challenge. And as I said, Healthwise is an old company, and in our older content was longer, and it talked about more things. And one of the keys to getting to this was to break down the content into smaller parts so that we don't have one document that's about treatment, what is, and 3 or 4 aspects. We broke it down so that the topics are about one aspect. And so it was a coordination of the development of content that really is just about one aspect for each very focused topic piece. So we don't have that problem where we're munging multiple aspects onto the document. And thinking about like how we do some incorporating of other content, and the first thing that we want to do with that is to find the sections. And so the approach that I would take to the challenge that you're describing would be to find the content within the content that specifically describes one aspect. Yes?
Are you using the predicates from UMLS dataset to come up with your aspects? No?
Not so much. So the UMLS terminologies, each one tends to be about one thing. For example, ICD-10-CM is mostly conditions and doesn't describe treatments. And CPT describes treatments or procedures, but not so much conditions. And we didn't, there really isn't much in there that does the aspects in the UMLS. Yes, in the back?
So, at the time of content injection, do you extract the subject object or
So the question is, do we extract the subject, predicate, and object in the content and then manage the data? And great question. Yes and no. So we do manage the mappings in RDF. We use EVN Edge as the management for that repository. We, kind of like what was described this morning, we use software to make suggestions, but everything where the final answer for what will this document have as a predicate and a concept is done by humans. That's a human choice. We have triples. We have triples for every one of those relationships. So there's from the concept to, as I had a slide earlier that showed the concept of bone scan and then multiple aspects to multiple documents. Those are each a triple. Yes?
So you had a lot of synonyms in that list. How are you actually employing it at runtime? Are you expanding? Are you calling that, getting that JSON response and then querying Solr with all of those different synonyms, or how does that work?
So the question is about the synonyms and how do we use all these synonyms for the entity recognition. Yes, what we're doing is that view of the concept taxonomy that I showed, we index all of that. And so at runtime in Solr, Solr is doing the hard work of resolving all those synonyms to one concept.
But are you putting that in the synonyms.txt file? Or
Oh, no, it's done where it's done as the synonyms are a field, actually multiple fields. So what we end up with is where basically all of those things, the synonyms, and then also we have like clinical synonyms and abbreviations, and then the codes as well. So those are, in many cases, they're different search models that we want to employ. So they're all in the index for each record where they apply. So lots of denormalization of the data so that the synonyms and all the codes, the things that are relative searchable items, are massively reproduced across the index. And Solr, of course, then does it super fast. Yes?
Thank you, Dan. This was excellent. I have two questions for you. One was, how many documents do you have? And the other is, I just want to clarify, it sounds like you use your concepts for your matching criteria.
Yes.
And your aspects for your ranking criteria. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. And let's see if I can say the question back. How do we use our aspects and concepts in ranking, and how many documents do we have?
Yeah, so your matching versus ranking criteria usage for concepts versus aspects.
Okay, so to do the ranking first, the concept ranking, concepts are part of the initial search, like for matching plus ranking. And then it's after we have that, then we use re-ranking for the aspect to boost the aspect within the already found matching concepts. And the number of documents that we have about 60 or 70,000 topics that are managed and used in the way that I've been describing here. We're still doing some migration from legacy content into this newer format, and we'll probably have we have about 150,000 documents altogether that are less precisely managed and still available. And we have legacy systems where those are all available, where all of the content is available. Anyway, so about 60, maybe I'll just say 65,000 that are managed in this way, and about 150,000 altogether. Yes?
Kind of related to that question. So if you search for how does it feel without specifying a concept, what would you get back in your search?
That wouldn't work very well. But, I've been showing you, okay, the question was, if you search for how does it feel, is that right? Yeah. How does it feel? Then what would the search do with that? And yeah, that's tricky. But so I've been describing our search API endpoint, and we also have a Chatbot product that manages more contexts and is used to integrate with Alexa, and it uses all the same principles, but there's front-end differences. Anyway, that we manage where if you have an actual conversation flow with multiple questions, then somebody would presumably say something like, tell me about bone scan or something. And so then you have a concept, and then if the next question says it, what is it, or how does it feel, then that session is keeping track of what the concept they originally brought up was. And I think that's the trick to doing what you're describing, is that you capture what the concept was and you remember, or your app remembers, what the subject is.
So at the search level, though, if you just said, how does it feel?
That'd be,
So what would you just get, a bunch of records together?
yeah, so this search does, this kind of entity recognition application for chatbots is like the higher level, or the best way of matching. But if that doesn't work, then it falls through to more traditional search methods. And so it would search on that, and it would ultimately find content that uses those words. I wouldn't like it very much. And we're about out of time. Can I take one more? Yes, sir? How do we connect our RDF graph to Solr? We do an export, and the RDF graph is, you typically use, well, actually with EVN, we use Sparkle as the query language. It typically takes like, I think it's 5 or 6 Sparkle queries to put together all the RDF into one of those concepts that I showed, where all the data comes together into the concept. So it's a process involving export, recombine the data, turn it into the format that we want, and then we index that concept view is pretty much what we index in Solr. Thank you very much.